ready. I will start the... All right, we as the affirmation stand firmly behind the following resolution. The U.S. federal government should implement a nationwide proficiency exam for public school teachers. Now, I'm going to go through some definitional issues as is the burden of the affirmation. The United States federal government, that's capitalized, should, meaning this is a policy debate, implement a nationwide proficiency exam. This is basically a national exam to test teacher preparedness and ability to teach the subjects they are paid to. I'm going to go basically into the specifics of what this test is later. And public school teachers are defining as educators working within the public school system. These are also basically pretty much self-explanatory. The primary value of today's debate is going to be net benefit for the United States. So whichever side can better create the most amount of benefit for the United States as a whole, that's the side that's going to win the round. So first I'm going to go into some issues with the status quo and why we need to take action in the first place in terms of education. Problems with the status quo. Contention one, the United States education system is not the best in the world, and consistently we've been ranked, in the middle ranking area of most, education ranking systems. Among the first, in mathematics, 29 nations and other jurisdictions outperform the United States by statistically significant margin. And these basically show a picture of educational stagnation in the United States. So this shows that, again, compared to the rest of the world, we're falling behind. We want some change here. We want, and this is also a lot to do with teachers, and the fact that a lot of them are undercertified currently in California. For example, there's a shortage of good teachers and certified teachers as well. That actually have knowledge that is needed to teach the students what they need to know. So in general, we see a problem, a stagnation in the education system that results in as well as faculty aren't doing the job that they need to. Yes.
Mr. Evans, point out whether these uncertified teachers go into the public school system or the private school system.
They go into the public school system. I can give you one example. 3 out of 10, basically 4 children are 3 to 10 times more likely to have uncertified teachers than in public schools than more affluent kids. So this shows that again there's a certification problem in the United States in public school teaching, which shows that there's a problem in terms of teacher quality. And even the certified teachers, yeah, there's an issue. After all, when we were doing a Google search about some of the data we needed to do, one of the first suggested this shows the perception of the United States in public school teachers. One of the first suggested things for search was public school teachers are idiots. So this shows that clearly there's a problem here when people are really looking at their teachers with some contempt. So again, issues with the status quo and teachers are really the root of this. So in order to create a system in which teachers are more accountable for their knowledge that we're supposed to know, the way that they teach, we're going to create a national proficiency exam that's overseen by the Department of Education. It will also be advised by the education sector, which is an independent policy think tank, as well as the Brookings Institution, among other think tanks, to include the other authorities. Now, the time frame, this is going to be implemented and created over the next 3 years, and the first year this plan is going to be implemented is the school year of 2019 to 2020. And the funding for this is going to come from the $833 billion in public land that we, the federal government, have just sort of lying around. According to the Office of Management and Budget, this is the number is $833 billion that's how much it's worth. And according to the Tax Foundation, these could generate considerable cash in the market, and we can see why. There are farming interests that would want this land, there are mining interests that would want this land, oil interests, all sorts of interests that would want this land. So this is going to be sold. Now the funding itself, how much we're going to spend. Well, according to Education Week, about $1.7 billion a year is funded by states for K-12 standardized tests. So if we round this up to an even $2 billion, this will cover the cost of our test. And $2 billion is a very tiny amount from the $833 billion. We're also going to add another $1 billion for basically to help fund for schools and basically give money so that to correct some of the disparities between schools of affluence and non-affluent. Now, talking about the test itself, sorry, I got a lot of activity. So the test itself, it's going to be taken during the summer months, once a year. The teachers have to take it. Half of this test is going to be knowledge-based. It's going to be based on the AP test that teachers have to take. But college professors and think tanks will be called in to adjust the difficulty level to what the teachers need to know. This is not just a college level exam. This is what the teachers need to know as well. Half of the test will be based on practice. basically a random kid from a similar income level of the school, will basically who will be taught by the teacher in a tutoring session in a subject that's not included in the curriculum, and the teacher will also have to design an assignment to basically show for the student for them to help absorb the information. This is all going to be overseen by an education specialist. And obviously kids are going to want to sign up for this because, or at least their parents will want them to sign up for this because this is free tutoring. Now, this is the specs of the test. Basically, we've shown why the status quo needs correcting, why teachers need to be better prepared. And I'm going to talk about some of the benefits of better prepared teachers. And I should also talk about the solvency, of course. This test is obviously going to, intuitively, it's going to help out because if you don't have any tests for when we leave school and we leave college, and when teachers leave college and such, they're never tested on that knowledge again, really. So they're allowed to get out of practice. They can just and with the test that allows a constant accountability for the knowledge that they're supposed to know, that they're supposed to be transmitting to the students, as well as the test on the teaching method of the teachers. So we see a constant accountability for both the knowledge of the teachers as well as the teaching exams. Teaching methods. So we see that this is clearly solving and creating accountability for the ability of the teachers to do these things. Now, some benefits of this. Benefits is, number one, there's clearly better prepared teachers. This is going to increase the educational value for the students, and this is good because we're going to have a more educated nation. This is going to help us in terms of the benefit of democracy because we're going to have more informed citizens in future. Number two, there's also an economic value because the better taught students, again, I compared the United States education system to the rest of the world. We need to be better prepared so that we can outperform China and all these other sorts of nations in central job creating areas such as science and technology. So this will help out immensely. And so, and again, so these are some of the benefits: democracy, economics, just better education in general. These are really great benefits in the United States that we need to address. So I got the strongest presentation. It's a lucky one. He's had this for years. It's disgusting.
All right. You talk to walls, All right, first negation.
Okay, so for So for a brief off-time roadmap, I'm going to first go over the framework, explain the framework and how it's going to implement later in the round, and then go over the disadvantages and eventually go on to on-case. There are cases specifically. So, U.S. federal government should implement a nationwide proficiency exam for public schools. Public school teachers. I am on the firmest negation for this resolution for a few main reasons. Now, first I would like to address the idea of net benefits. Now, this is very clearly a policy round, and therefore it should very clearly be net benefits. I have no problem with net benefits. Now, I'm going to explain to you later on why the negation actually gets more net benefits at the time we're here to implement. Now, the correct disadvantage with their plan is that states implement these exams, such as in Illinois, where in 2009, where they implemented this exact same exam that they're implementing now. However, according to the 2014 ranking system by the American Legislative Exchange Council, which is basically what decides your report cards, kids, is actually ranking them at C average, putting them at 30 above in all states. Now, this was a plan that was implemented in 2009, and we haven't seen any actual changes since. So we can see that the fact that we're implementing it before could give you no reason to believe that there's a link between implementing these tests and actually coming up with better educated individuals and better educated students. There's no link between the two, and thus their solvency doesn't actually trigger. Now, moving on to disadvantage number 2. Proficiency exams are not actual tests of intelligence. They are tests that decide how well they can relate to the culture they're teaching in. These are things along the lines of English proficiency exams. Now, these don't actually test whether or not someone actually knows what they're teaching. They test on how well they were able to speak English, or how well they knew about English history, or American history, and furthermore. So they haven't actually been proven to be tests of the intelligence or the skills of a teacher in the past. Yes?
So do you believe that teachers should not be tested on their English abilities?
I'm getting that later. I'm going to get to that in the counterplan. I'm specifically saying how this top-down method that you are using isn't actually beneficial. I'll get to that in a little bit. Disadvantage number 3: government-wide, and this is going to be the main difference between the counterplan and their plan. The government-wide standardized tests are known to fail, primarily due to the difference in districts. Top-down standardized imposed tests from the United States federal government are problematic. They impose content specifications that are taken as a whole, but not implemented at a district level. So the needs of a district aren't being taken into account when you simply make this change from a top-down status and make a blanket statement, a blanket standardized test for the entirety of the United States government. A better solution would be to implement it at a district level. And I'll get to why the advantages of that later on. My fourth disadvantage would be the wealthy and qualified teachers are more likely to move from one school to another school. So, for example, let's say the passing rate for these standardized tests is 70% or higher. People get 100% on these tests, have passed the tests that everyone is taking. So they're going to be more likely to move to a school where they're going to get paid more. Those are going to be things along the lines of private schools. So they've taken these tests, they passed it, they're now worth more than most other teachers. A person who got 70% on this test technically still passes, but they're still going to stay at that school because they're not comparable to that of other teachers. And I'm going to explain why that's actually a problem, because these teachers are, the qualified teachers are going to move on. They're going to find schools that are going to pay them more. The less qualified teachers are going to continue to stay, and that's a problem when you implement a blanket exam. My fifth disad is that their plan only triggers on it is actually a funding disad. Their plan only triggers on the event that they actually purchase land, which is entirely where they're getting their funding from. Now, they give you a solid enough reason to say why this land will be purchased, but not one that actually says that this land is guaranteed to be purchased. Now, I would like to throw that out there just as a clarification that there's still a chance that nobody buys this, or still a chance that it doesn't end up being as much as they would hope. Now, the counterplan to this is that we would like to, the counterplan is that we're going to implement and I've already hinted at this point, is that we're going to implement a district district proficiency exam. Something that the districts can monitor and decide the best proficiency exam for their district, because ultimately districts have different needs, and that should be reflected in the test that they take. Now, I'm going to talk about how this solves for all the disadvantages mentioned before. The first disadvantage was that states that have implemented top-down policies from the government haven't worked. That's examples of Illinois. However, there isn't an example that we can, that is an example of their plan failing. However, we can show you that and it fails according to the Stanford, yes?
Can you say conclusively that the Illinois exam came from a federal source?
Yes, I absolutely can, because in the citation from the American Legislative Exchange Council, it was a government implemented exam that, state implemented exam for Illinois. What?
Federal government.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Yes. The federal government implemented it, but it was only. Sorry, you're right. I did say state. Okay. I'm talking about the state of Illinois. Yes. Okay. Now, I'm talking about how it being the same test that they apply to all of their districts. Now, there's multiple districts within Illinois, so this is an example of all these districts not being taken into account, an example of why the Illinois education system hasn't improved as a result of this test. Now, moving on. Oh, and so we solve for that in our counterplan because we do it at a district level. We cater it to the needs of each district and therefore solve, and that is one net benefit that you can put for the negation side with our counterplan. Net benefit number two comes from the disadvantage in their case, which will be the proficiency exams are not actual tests of intelligence because they're just simply tests on, because they're simply too broad and just a test of how well of the culture that they are in. However, at the district level, we can keep it catered to the people who are going to be in that district, instead of making it a blanket statement in which we just have to hope that most teachers fall under it. Now, convention number three, the government-wide standardized tests are known to fail. So we can see that even after we've implemented these before, and I've already given you examples of implementation before, we can see that these top-down standards don't actually work. A research paper from Stanford University has indicated that the main problem is because they are top-down. They are essentially from the U.S. federal government down. It doesn't take into account districts. It's one blanket standardized test, and that's a problem because it's not catered. And which is going to be another solution that we can solve for. That's another harm that we solve for with the negation plan, counterplan. The last disad would be the wealthy and the qualified teachers move on. Now, if I get 100% on my district test, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm better than any other, than someone else who got maybe 90% on a different district test, because the districts are essentially different. I can claim, however, if I got 100% on a blanket one across the country, compared to someone who got 90 on the exact same test, technically I'm a worthwhile, more worthy teacher under their plan. So we can solve for this as well, and we can still subsume all the advantages all the advantages that they present to you, but we can guarantee that we have access to those advantages because we can guarantee you solve it.
This is already set, so.
Oh, thanks so much. Okay.
If you guys want, you can use your phone as timers, we don't care.
Well, mine is almost dead.
Oh. So never mind.
Thank you, though. Okay, I'm going to do a quick brief outline roadmap if everyone else is okay with that.
Yeah.
Is it ready? Ready?
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay. So the brief outline roadmap, I want to discuss about our main contentions, talk about why we're actually superior in terms of the benefits and net benefits that we and our opponents agree on, and then discuss about their attempt at a counter plan and talk about why it's actually irrelevant and why our plan is a little bit better. So, starting off. Now, our main contentions that we talked about before is we talked about the issues with the status quo itself and how the fact the United States currently is ranked 29th in mathematics and is currently actually going down. Like, we are, as a powerhouse nation and one country that we like to consider ourselves one of the best in the world, we really are awful at training our youth to be prepared for facing actual physical labor, not physical labor, dealing with jobs as well as dealing with most situations in general. Like, we are not able to educate our own youth, yet we consider ourselves one of the best countries in the world. That's absurd. Now, by the way, second thing I want to talk about is the fact that we want change in the United States. We recognize that this is an issue, and in fact, I have a quote from the American Secretary of Education, Secretary of Education. What we need to do, as he says, quote unquote, invest in early education, raise academic standards, make college affordable, and do more to recruit and retain top-notch educators. And I'll show why this is a benefit and why, in fact, our plan solves for that. Now, I want to talk about our plan itself and be a little bit more specific about what it does and why it actually is good. Our opponent's main attempt at a counter-refutation was the simple fact that it didn't work in Illinois, which, by the way, this is a different test from what we were doing, and it was a state-implemented test, not a federal one, and it didn't prove the problem wrong. And now, the second thing is the fact that it doesn't adapt well enough. As we actually talked about in the plan itself, it will be adapted by special education interest groups who will also be involved in the test, and it's not just a written-out test that revolves on memorization. It's specifically tailored to what the teacher is teaching, and I think a teacher who is going to take the AP test or is going to teach students to take the AP test should be able to do well in the test himself. In fact, actually, one of my teachers, he was giving me a quick anecdote, and one of the things he talked about is he took the AP US History test with a bunch of other AP, with 7 other AP US History teachers. He got 3 wrong and thought he did awful, but he was the best, outperforming the second best teacher by about 15 questions wrong. These are the people who are teaching us how to take that same test, yet they can't take it themselves. This isn't asking about cultural understanding like my opponents think with a standardized test. This is about knowing the material you're teaching to your students. This isn't absurd. This is a necessity. This benefits the students. This benefits the United States as students become better prepared, better educated, and better ready to face the world later on. Now, the other problem that they came up with one of the things they were talking about once again was what adapting. It really doesn't work simply because with the variety of options available with the variety of the district exam, the problem is there's almost too much variety. Each one doesn't really build off each other, but with the federal one, there's a lot of communication because it is federal. It's across the entire nation. And it allows for constant education. And in areas like Texas, for example, it doesn't teach certain parts of scientific education, such as evolution. This ensures that everyone gets a basic starting point. Every American has a fundamental education level that they can all be equal on. It's tailored to the teacher to make sure that everyone has the same education level. With their district, per district one, education levels per district will remain different. And the problem is, teachers in different districts, yes.
Districts still have standards given to them by the government, so there's still going to be standards. How do you respond?
Well, the fact is, obviously, for example, areas like Texas don't follow completely all the standards in areas. But when you have a federal test that's implemented, the fact is, everyone is going to have a basic education level that is going to be based off because their teachers are going to at a similar level in terms of their teaching ability, and that's a necessity because we can't have teachers who are actually in lower quality. Now, another thing that I talked about is that standards are good, but the federal ones are better because there's more of them and they can be enforced a little bit better. The problem with the district is they can be loose, they can be, as they mentioned, yes, they can adapt, but the problem is they can be pushed and moved around a little bit too far and actually prevent a unionized standard. Now, another thing they talked about is the problem with this. They didn't really address any of our problems with the status quo right now. I guess they sort of mentioned it in terms of that they were talking about with a counter plan that they agreed that it existed, but the problem is theirs really doesn't put the whole U.S. back into its place in the world. As we were talking about, we're 29th in mathematics. This guarantees a position back up in the place, as teachers will guarantee to get people better educated, do well on other tests, and perform well compared to other nations. Now, nothing.
Now, if we still implement a test and we still solve for all the things you solve for, except we fix some of the harms that you don't solve for, how are you still winning on that benefit? Well, what kind
Yeah. Go back and forth. Sorry. My apologies. Okay, moving on. One of the things that their detriments that they were talking about was the fact that it didn't adapt. That was their biggest detriment, and the fact that they came with the Illinois example, which, as we proved, is a state implemented, which means kind of doesn't go against the whole federal example, and the fact that their whole thing about not adapting clearly failed to recognize the whole proportion, or whole other half of the test, which wasn't just addressing or just having a teacher take a multiple choice test, but actually having them interact with the student. One of their issues that they came up with actually was about the fact that the test is too wide. It doesn't focus enough, and you can easily pass this, but based on memorization. Not the 50% that involves you actually tutoring a student. This is actually having somebody judge and see whether or not you are capable of teaching another student, which is something you are going to be doing as a teacher, I'm assuming. And the fact that this will actually push for better teachers, guarantee a better standard of living and a better life for students as they are more educated, have more job opportunities, and are generally better in the worldwide economic community. Now, really, we've addressed all of their main friction points. They really haven't addressed the fact that our method adapts as well, that our method actually solves for the problems better, and the fact that they never really address the fact why district would be directly better than federal, other than it would adapt, which, as we proved, the federal one would adapt as well, but just ensure that across the United States, every student has the basic education level that they can all be based off of and judged by. Now, one thing I want to talk about, one more thing, which is about tenure and the fact that sometimes teachers can actually remain in positions longer than remain in positions of teaching despite the fact that they have long since passed their prime, and the fact this ensures that teachers will once again every year be re-upped, and that teachers will remain relevant, able to teach, and the system itself will be able to learn as there's that one-on-one interaction where judges or the will be able to see what actually works best, be able to adapt the whole formula to make sure that the U.S. education system is the best in the world, which is why I urge the strongest vote in the affirmation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Make two whenever you're ready to go. Will you be doing an off-time roadmap first?
Yeah, we'll do that.
Organizing these policy flow.
Okay, I think I'm gonna go CP, fifth DA, fourth DA, third DA, first DA, second DA.
Wait, can you do me a huge favor?
Just do them in order. Just do the walkies, that's easier.
Okay, no. If you're gonna do the DAs, can you just go 5 to 1 instead of 5, 4, 3, 1, 2?
You're so close. Okay, I'm gonna go CP, DA. I'm gonna hit arms. I'm gonna hit policies. I'm gonna hit the back.
DAs, are you going bottom up?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Thank you, Dylan.
Well, he's going in order bottom up, so that's okay.
Cool. Over backwards.
Yeah.
Ready?
Yes.
Opponent ready? Partner ready? let's go into our counter plan. Okay, they have several answers, and nothing with answers actually sufficient to address the problem. One, you try to be humorous and say like, hey, I guess that's a science education problem, where they literally say, we're gonna believe and like, we're not gonna believe it. Okay, I have several responses. I have one response to this. One, okay, it might be the case that maybe Texas school boards don't want to teach this. However, it's also the case that Texas school boards generally want their children to be college ready, and they're gonna pursue the ways that get their children the most college ready if you allow them to specialize. I think that college is a unique environment where you get more benefits if you're college ready, because college serves to liberalize a lot of students. So even if you didn't get the college education, that education in your home district, you get it in college anyway. So us promoting more college ready students means we get that impact anyway. The second response is that, okay, that education debate has been ongoing for a while. We're conservative, evangelicals, and reasonable people like to debate about how science education should be taught. You simply say, hey, we're not gonna have this debate anymore, we're gonna fiat and just pass it, means that you cause a lot of political backlash, and you simply say, hey, you can't teach science education the way you want to teach it anymore. The third response is that if you don't buy either of those arguments, there's definitely a difference between saying you're proficient to teach science and saying now you have to teach this way. The proficiency exam doesn't actually mandate you have to teach after you finish taking it. So schools could say, a science teacher could say like, hey, I know the difference, I'm gonna pass the test, but then after they pass the test, not actually change how to teach evolution. Which means that that's actually not a good response to anything, and if it is a response, it applies equally as well to their plan. Remember, we ran a counter plan, which means, actually, give it a response. I'll take your question.
So if they care about college readiness so much, then why are they teaching, why are they not teaching evolution in the first place in the curriculum?
Because these kids are so passing that, because these kids want to pass reading and math and people to get to college. So literally, this is what you need to do to get to college. Once you get to college, science education starts mattering more. It's a sad fact, but it's true.
Why don't they do it in high school?
You have to do point of information.
The second response they made is that districts aren't always another, which means that we should stop this variability and just go for a nationwide good standard. Okay, several responses to this. One, I'm pretty sure districts communicate with each other and districts are able to collaborate, which means that they can copy best used strategies from districts that have been doing things successfully. Second, states review what the districts do. So let's say that the district implements a policy, it's not too bad. I'm pretty sure the state can set it and change it, which means that argument falls on the floor. That's all the responses to the counterplan. So they never attack counterplans, they never actually attack counterplan solvency, but we solve all of our disads, they still fall into it. So on the net benefits debate alone, if we solve all the disads and they still trigger the disads, then you have to go down on our benefits. Let's go to the disads. I'm gonna go from 5 to 1. They completely dropped this at 5. They have literally no response saying how they're gonna guarantee that we're gonna sell enough land. They say over willing to. That's not the same thing as saying people are willing to purchase it. This is important because if they never get funding, then the plan has to be an unfunded mandate. And if it's an unfunded mandate, they never get any solvency, which means they lose access to all of their impacts. Yes.
Doesn't the affirmation get fiat and therefore will get the funding definitely?
You get fiat saying, hey, Congress passes this law. You don't get fiat saying, hey, now you have to buy this land. This is different. They also dropped this at 4, where we said that wealthy teachers are literally gonna move out, which means that in the world of plan, the best teachers go to the best schools, and the teachers who barely pass go to the worst schools. This essentially means that we're pretty much like perpetuating a cycle of bad education in underprivileged communities. Which means in the world of plan, the status quo continues to be just as crappy as it already is. In the world of counter plan, the next world, we actually fix this issue when districts decide for themselves. They also dropped this at 3, where they don't tell us why the government top-down approach is necessarily better. Finally, they group this as 1 and this as 2 together, where they say like, hey, it's more important that we teach practical skills and teach students how to pass AP tests, and culture isn't that important. Okay, there's several responses to this. One, I think that the teacher practical skills response is devastatingly non-unique to the status quo. Several reasons. One, I'm pretty sure that to even get a teaching degree, you have to take like a student teaching course for those colleges. Which means the same college professors that they're bringing onto your board already taught a course in college teaching on teaching education that the teachers have to take to even get a teaching degree. Which means that it's not unique, it already happens in the status quo. The second argument is that, okay, first of all, culture matters. Like, they might not believe it, but there's definitely like a hegemonized view of history, and we need to explore different things. In my history class, we're never going to talk about Malcolm X. The reason we never talk about Malcolm X is because Malcolm X is dangerous to the white suburbanite community. In a district that actually wants to increase public solidarization or increasing of their identity, they might actually do it. I have very good examples of this. Arizona pursues an ethnic studies program, other schools don't. Therefore, Arizona standards probably need to be different than other schools across the nation. These are important reasons for why them ignoring culture and variety actually matters. Finally, going to the solvency. Okay, for my solvency pool, I want you to cross-apply disadvantage 1, disadvantage 3, disadvantage 4, disadvantage 5. They can't fund it, they don't show how, they can't fund it, they ignore culture, and they ignore whatever I said in disadvantage 3, and more importantly, they actually don't show you any correlation between, like, student performance and having better teachers. We show you a card from Illinois that says, hey, it literally didn't matter. The fact that we showed you a card is using a counter warrant. If you don't have a counter warrant, then you literally need to doubt whether this is going to work at all. Finally, okay, below cost farms, the fuels and qualities as well as the planners. Impact. Okay, if they don't want to solve it, they know they want impacts. But finally, okay, what I want to say to their democracy impact is you can take this impact right out. The reason we're not going to see more democracy is because there's a stunning amount of voter apathy in society right now. In addition to that, there's a lack of political efficacy among underprivileged minorities. Among underprivileged students. These underprivileged students literally don't think their vote matters, saying, good job, you passed high school. It's not going to suddenly make them think their vote matters if people are still being devastatingly unfair to them. If the government is still being devastatingly unfair to them, they're not going to perceive their vote as mattering, so democracy doesn't improve at all. Second, okay, the second impact about better teachers, okay, first of all, impact turned that argument by cross-applying the culture argument that I gave you. The culture argument actually produces better teachers, because those better teachers actually are fit the district better. Finally, go to the outperforming one. Okay, they don't show a clear link story showing how to actually improve performance overall. I think the CC is one of them to do it anyway. For all these reasons, I would strong.
Thank you.
Okay, for an off-time roadmap, I'm going to first go over any dissets that my partner has already mentioned that we dropped, anything that needs to be mentioned still in regards to harms, and then continue on to give you a two-world analysis at the end that relates back to the net benefits. Now I'll show you again. The affirmation provides you many compelling reasons on why something's wrong with the status quo. What they don't provide you is a reason why they fix it, and that's the solvency issue in this round. Their solutions only trigger in two main ways. First off, the first solution that only triggers assuming that people buy their land. Now, as my partner's already stated, you can't fiat that across. Now, they dropped this point, so they recognize it, even though as it started out as something I only mentioned slightly at the end, it's now something that actually matters because they simply just didn't respond to it. They have no response to the idea that there is potentially no way that they earn any money for their plan. You don't have any money for your plan, you can't pass the plan. So they get access to none of their benefits in that regard. Now, moving on. They provide you no link to the difference between implementing these standardized tests and actually creating a solution. Now, we've given you, when my partner says he's giving you a card, he's giving you essentially evidence that shows how the government implemented policies do not actually work. Now, they haven't given you any information onto why they do work, and I've given you more than enough reasons to why the district method is preferable. As I've already shown, we've given you examples in 2009 where this was implemented literally years ago, and this hasn't had a single bit of change since then. They're still ranked below half of everybody else. So we can't actually see this change. This is something that's been flown completely across the board because they don't give you that, they don't provide you that crucial link that they need. Third, they dropped the fourth main disadvantage about the teacher migration. They don't have any response to the idea that the teachers will migrate based off of these tests. This is something that applies to their plan and only their plan. Now, because of this, I'm actually going to go, this will become more prevalent as to why that's important later on. Now, I'm going to address one thing is that they tack on an argument at the end about tenure. However, both tenure and they tack on an argument at the end about these different districts in regards to what they're going to teach. As my partner has already stated, there's going to be somewhat of an incentive for these teachers who want their students to go to college. Now, even still, this isn't a unique argument to the affirmations or the negations counterclaim. The problems that we're running into with these standardized tests and just Texas absolutely refusing to teach things is still going to apply to them. Now, there's only a few, so the only disadvantage that they've even thrown at our counter plan applies to them as much as it applies to us, which is going to go into my two-world analysis. Now, we're calling that they've dropped disadvantage 1, 3, 4, and 5. They have no solvency. Now, in the negation or in the affirmation world, they attempt to solve for many problems. What they don't take into account is the disadvantages that I mentioned before. And once again, I'm going to restate these disadvantages just so that way I stop using the numbers. The disadvantage one being that the states implement these exams, and as I've shown in Illinois, they aren't seen to work. That's a disadvantage that they don't account for, they don't respond to, and thus still applies to their plan. They've sufficiently responded to the second disadvantage, so we're going to move on to the third disadvantage, which is the government-wide standardized tests are known to fail primarily due to the difference in districts. Now, this is where the counterplan triggers, because we don't allow that to happen. We keep it within the districts, because the districts are going to be able to cater towards their teachers, towards their districts, and actually ultimately be able to provide you a more comprehensive test. Now, that is something that doesn't apply to their plan because they simply dropped it. The fourth disadvantage that I've mentioned would be that the wealthy qualified teachers will move on, and I've already mentioned why that was dropped, and that still applies to their plan. They will move on, and I give you a reason why if it's in different districts, you can't compare the two. And lastly, I've mentioned that they can't guarantee you funding. That's another point that's been dropped. So, if we're going to base this off, in this round, once again, it's based on net benefits. Both sides have agreed with that. It's been sufficiently obvious. Now let's actually look at these net benefits. In the net benefits, they claim to solve for many of these educational issues. What they don't solve for is the disadvantage that they have dropped. Regardless of whether or not they think that it fixes all these problems, what it doesn't solve is the harms that come with their case. What our plan actually does is take still the advantages that they get for trying to solve these things, but actually gives you a reason to vote for it. Because ultimately, our plan has some level of change. It not only takes all of the advantages that they are trying to get by increasing the United States in the form of rank against other nations, but it also solves for their problems. The disadvantages that come with their problems, you can treat them as negatives, -1s, if you want to, in that regard. So they might have +6 in terms of the things that they're going to benefit in terms of U.S. ranking, but they still have -4 for the disadvantages that they drop. What we don't have is those disadvantages. So regardless of whether, the way this round should be weighed on is net benefits, as we've already seen, we match their net benefits, but then solve for those harms. So we've inherently increased the net benefits overall. We've solved for some of these problems. They haven't responded to these problems. They are problems that they have readily accepted into their plan and have acknowledged that we fix because we give them a counterplan in which they don't sufficiently respond. And they do that by dropping all of these harms. So if this round is based off of net benefits, and that is what you choose to base your judge decision on, then we have given them more benefits than both.
All right, judges ready?
Wait.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
So off-time roadmap, first I'm going to basically take out some of the disadvantages and then show ultimately why we provide the most amount of net benefits in the round. So I'm just going to go briefly just over some of these and basically show, first of all, that we don't have these disadvantages that they do, and second of all, that they don't really solve for the disadvantages they supposedly cite for us. So this is a big thing that a lot of the disadvantages they supposedly cite that we will have because of the district, because they're giving it to the district, they don't really solve for themselves. So it really either cancels out or is a harm for them. So I'll go over their 5 disadvantages. One of them is that they basically said we don't even know that state exams work because of this Illinois test. Well, they admitted that there's a state test and it's really not analogous to the federal test that we proposed. They also provided no warrant for the fact that it was actually the fact that it was a top-down approach that caused these tests not to work. We don't know what the composition of this Illinois test. We don't know anything about it. We provided no warrant for the fact that it was the federal government or a top government that's the reason that it's a bad test. So this example really doesn't matter at all. Second, they said the test of intelligence versus culture. Basically, they account for culture. One of their ideas about culture is that it's just going to be about we shouldn't be tested. It's basically about English ability and things like that. Well, that's not really a matter of culture. I mean, teachers should know English. I mean, that's a pretty big, qualification for the job. These sorts of, it does not matter about, what your culture is to know, calculus or algebra or math or history, these sorts of things that they need to teach. It's not a matter of culture at all. We also account for culture, in our second part of our test, we said that we're going to get a student from a similar income level of their school so that, we can see exactly how, it would work, how the teaching ability works for that culture and that which they teach. So, we account for this as well. And also the fact that they say it's just not a test of intelligence, but we're testing material that they should know, and we're testing the teaching ability. They didn't really provide a real reason why they're not testing intelligence. Number 3, the local curriculum that we're not accounting for local needs. Well, we're actually, and they said that we didn't account for this, but what really we did account for this because we're saying that the federal test will assert national quality, and we're using this Texas evolution example. Now, basically, in our scenario, in the federal test, they will be forced to learn evolution and know evolution because this is a big scientific issue, and it is important for college readiness. But in their scenario, the district designs, and the district, because it's a school, it's run by the school board, and they run by a curriculum that does not want evolution. Evolution won't even be on the test. Creationism will be on the test. So why, I don't understand how their test provides any sort of college readiness. Again, it does not solve for any of the disadvantages that they say we have. We do solve the disadvantage because we get the national, we get the national quality. Number 4, they said, wealthy schools and teachers. This is really not very important for the big emphasis in the debate. I'm not going to spend much time on that. Number 5, the funding. So they never really provided a warrant for why exactly we wouldn't be able to get the funding. They just said, well, we might not be able to, but they provided no funding whatsoever for the district plan. So really, we should not be any sort of.
Judge, we believe that's a brand new point. They've never mentioned funding in regards to our plan. That hasn't been mentioned previously.
I mean, we've implied that throughout the speech,
Personally, I definitely agree with that point of order.
I uphold the point of order.
Well, they went on majority. I'm striking it down, but they went on majority.
Okay, so we're upholding it.
All right. Okay.
Just point of clarification.
Why?
Yeah, no, I'm trying to make sure. What are you point of ordering?
The funding.
Yes.
From the funding about your side, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, again, we show how we've really dealt with all these disads, and they've really not shown why the district approach really changes anything. It really affects, for example, how a lot of these things, and how actually tailoring it to the district can actually be bad. In the example of Texas, the local curriculums, how we're not going to get a national standard of quality that all kids deserve. They deserve good teachers on a national standard. So, this is a huge issue. Now I'm going to explain some of the differences between our plans, some of the things I didn't address at all. One of the things it didn't address at all was the $1 billion that we're allocating to poor schools to help with funding there. This is in the beginning of our plan. We said that $2 billion would be allocated to the teacher test and $1 billion would be allocated to the poor schools. That they're not solving for this at all. We're actually helping with the poverty issue, and we're helping students in bad schools to get better schools. So this helps us in the education department. And in general, their local issue, their local plan does not give a national standard of quality. This is a very important point. That federally, we get a national standard of quality.
In regards to that last point,
About the $1 billion?
It's $1 billion.
Yeah, that one. I would like to identify that their second speaker didn't continue to carry that argument across, and I believe that was a drop point and hasn't been mentioned since.
That was a question. Because here's the thing. The thing is that you didn't extend it, but neither did they. So technically, it's not like it leaves the flow.
Honestly, regardless of whether he ignores it or answers it, I'm dropping it because it was dropped by 2 speakers already. So to me, it makes no difference. It's whether or not you want to spend your time elsewhere.
Okay.
Well, for me, this is actually kind of a voting issue, sort of. So actually,
I'm not going to
bring up a point that was dropped.
I mean, that was the plan. It's part of the plan. You didn't
But
respond
you
to it.
dropped your plan in your second, I mean, you mentioned it in your
Well,
first
it's
speech.
like,
and
Well,
then-
they
the
took-
argument that they can, it's like,
Why would I
they
bring it
responded,
up?
so they
Right,
don't.
so they,
Yeah, why
so
would
they,
we-
so they
I didn't
highlighted
feel
the
the
power by
necessity
fail.
to
Right,
really
but no,
make
no,
it
but it's
hurt.
not.
But if they didn't respond, they dropped the point. Not
Yeah,
we
we
didn't.
Yeah, they dropped the point, so
But
that
then
means
they,
it stays on.
Oh, but
but
they
they
need to
failed to
mention-
extend it,
to
they need to
extend it.
realize
But
that
the
they
thing-
dropped it and
no,
extended
but
across
the
the flow
thing
to
is-
keep it alive.
But the thing
Yeah.
is, because his first speech is still constructive, he's not saying it's a drop point because he's Samano's after him. So what happens is
No, but the point that I'm trying to make is that listen, fine that they didn't that they didn't.
But then
fine.
he's nothing to
He needs-
respond
but he
to.
needs- No, that's not the point. But he has to say, listen, they dropped that entire
But it's not a drop
agreement
point at that point
automatically.
because they're still constructive. It's not a drop point. It's not a drop point until the rebuttal.
You're right, it's a constructive, but if they're constructing their case, they have to extend all the parts that they're
You
constructing.
know what, it's part of the plan, overruled, continue.
Okay. So we get this complete benefit of $1 billion going to poor schools to combat poverty and help education equality in those areas. So this is also, so in general,
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, you might get access to the part of the plan, but you never.
Wait,
make
clear.
an
Wait,
argument-
that's slow down. Sorry.
Slow down, slow down.
What are their rules violations? What have they done? What have they said this is?
Introducing a tax,
Of specifically
Of what?
reducing poverty.
No,
No,
that
that
was
was-
mentioned.
No, that was
in the
just
plan.
bigger, okay.
That was in the plan, overruled.
You have copy.
Continue.
Hang on.
so yeah, we get this whole educational equality thing, and yeah, all right. So the federal, national, ultimately the difference between these two plans is that we get the national quality of a federal test. We get the educational experts that we mentioned in the first part. They really provided no details in their plan. They provided no reason why district would provide better teacher preparedness. So we get better educational quality. We get the benefits of democracy. We get all of these things. And plus the $1 billion in poverty to fight poverty. So we ultimately win this round because we have greater benefits. That's why I was talking about the other thing.
Thank you. Okay, well, first of all, great round, guys. This actually definitely is going to be probably one of my two toughest rounds for a judge at this tournament. So yeah.
I think Michaela and I are like, you got it.
Yeah. So great. That's interesting.
So where we.
So guys, head out.
I was meant to vacate the room.
So
Yeah, I like it.
They say we're part of the poverty program, relax it or just stick to your message? Okay. I guess the poverty program. We are probably as responsible that they have in our house. An argument that I put down on the comments, say, this instance says we plan plus, you can't just plan. Otherwise, if you do that, plan plus. You have less than 1%. Oh my god, that was amazing. Sorry about the weird stuff.
Yeah, this is one of those rounds where it's like, just communicating about this far, and it was against a team that actually first match on that was amazing. There's actually a thing. Because I've never had a day where
Usually go really fast and yell.
After your first round, I had to comment about the whole yelling thing, and for like the rest of them, I slowly turned it into yeah. But this one is actually, believe it or not, a little bit more aggressive than my previous one, simply because the judge doesn't laugh at me. He actually, because I was looking at last year once, he made a specific comment talking about my style. So I kind of gave it to him.
I told him to call his ride. Yeah, that didn't happen. Oh, speaking of, my dad. Oh,